has been far too long. Far too long since I set up Camtasia to record. It has been far too long since I spoke into a microphone without somebody on the other end. Not to say that I don't like having discussions, it's just been far too long where I was the one and only voice. Yes, I know in written form I have said on more than one occasion, especially recently, that I have been, I've been dealing with some burnout issues over the last couple months as far as Let's Play series is concerned, other than my series with Sam, because, well, there's the rapport of the discussion idea, and that's why normally and recently all you've been seeing is discussion videos. Whether it's me and Sam, whether it's me and Pro Wrestling Nation Sam, who I have the 2004 Let's Play with, or Sam from Here's What All Things WWE. But I promised a few weeks ago in a retro Let's Play look back that I would be having a surprise for you, and the surprise is the series is still going. At some point last year, I started the Inside TEW series, where I would go into personal saves that I have and give you an inside look. And this, my friends, was not just episode 1, not just episode 2, but also episode 3 of the series. And every time it was a little bit further ahead, a little bit further ahead, a little bit further ahead. But now it is not just the new millennium, not just the year 2000, but is 9 years since the start of this season, and we are still going as strong as we were at day number 1. And to be honest, I think that in a strange way, we're going stronger now than we were at day number 1, because, well, at day number 1, I was still getting used to it. I was giving it a chance. I was letting, I was running the stories that the company had going at the time. Like, if we look back to my first ever pay-per-view in 1991, which was Clash of the Champions, you'll see a lot of faces who were there in 1991, and some, well, who weren't, like the original Midnight Express, which is, I wager to guess, Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose, and not Dennis Condrey and Norville Austin, or Randy Rose and Norville Austin. In actuality, they might have been there. I'm not sure. I don't think so, but I'm not sure. Then you go back, if I showed you ratings that Bobby Eaton is getting now as opposed to what he was getting in 1991, you'd be dumbfounded with how bad this match got. And yes, some of you might put it towards Tom Zank as opposed to Bobby Eaton, but either way, that's the reason why Bobby Eaton basically became the first crowned champion in this season, or newly crowned champion, I should say, because I wanted to get the belt off the Z-Man any way I could. Dustin Rhodes and Michael Wall Street. I believe Dustin was feuding with the York Foundation. That's why that feud was there. Lex Luger was still in the mix of his record-breaking or record-setting United States title reign. And then we had Flair and Sting. And now fast forward to the end of 1991, which is, I believe, Starrcade. You still had Steve Austin in the pre-show, you still had certain things, but now you had Owen Hart in the light heavyweight title. Which is actually kind of funny because I think that the light heavyweight title actually did appear in WCW in 1991, in the late 1991. Then you also had the disbanding or the blow-off of the feud between the York Foundation, between Terry Taylor and Michael Wall Street, which I don't remember what happened to Terry Taylor, but I can tell you Michael Wall Street, I'm pretty sure, ended up in Japan. And then you had the original Texas Outlaws versus the new Texas Outlaws, which was Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch. The original Texas Outlaws versus Dustin Rhodes and Matt Bourne, the current Texas Outlaws, which if I go back to the title history, which I can show you in a second, you will see that the Texas Outlaws, Bourne and Dustin Rhodes, were one of the top tag teams at one point, and in many ways were one of the better tag teams I created in this season. Speaking of tag team blow-offs, Doom, with Ron Simmons and Butch Reed blowing off in a cage match at the pay-per-view. A very Texas-esque type thing with a dueling cage match on the show. And then we move to the 6-man tag team titles, which is, I believe, the Dangerous Alliance against Bobby Eaton and the Fabulous Ones. Basically, you can look at it as the 6-man titles were there at the start, but weren't long for WCW because I hate the 6-man titles because I think the 6-man tag team titles are a bad idea. Speaking of tag team blow-offs, and as you can tell, at one point, you had the York Foundation breakup, Doom breakup, and the Horsemen breakup, which you see Tully and Arn feuding below in a call-out and what would end up in a brawl. Then you have the Rock and Roll Express with the Steiners, but then the Midnight Express reunite and attack the Rock and Roll to start up a feud going into 1992 between the Rock and Roll and the Midnights. And of course, what better way to end the first year than to have Steamboat and Flair fight for the NWA World Heavyweight title, with Steamboat getting the victory and becoming champion. But now, look at my last pay-per-view. You have Cruiserweight Champion, you have Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy. Owen Hart's U.S. Champion. Owen Hart, 9 years ago, was Light Heavyweight Champion. Booker T was with Stevie Ray in a tag team. Now Booker T isn't here. Anthony Durant just debuted and was one of the hottest up-and-comers in the company. Malenko has come so far. Don't base, that off that, but, I don't know what to say to that. Look at this. Ken Shamrock has been here twice. This run 150 times better than his last run with the company, where his main feud was, I believe, with either Chris Jericho or Dan Severn. I don't remember. And then you go down, and Eddie Guerrero, who had not won the world title in 6 years, won the world title. Eddie Guerrero, who had not been world champion in 6 years, is now world champion. I'm just gonna go check on that to see if Kenny has actually had 2 runs with the company, and he has, with this one just starting a little over a year and a half ago, with back in the summer of 98. And as you can see, he actually worked for me for a time in 1991, and then again in September 1993 to December 1994, which I think the 1993 to 1994 run is the one I was talking about. But the funny thing, before his short run with the Southern Heavyweight title, he had never won a title. But now I actually am giving Kenny the opportunity to win championships. But that shows just the difference of it's time to start pushing new people. It's not necessarily that the wrong people are on time decline. The right people are. I mean, Terry Funk's 55 years old. Vader's here for one more run. Roddy Piper, I don't remember the last time he actually worked a match. I can't wait for him to retire. Actually, the last time he worked a match was 1999. It was January 1999. The last time he did something worthwhile? The last time he did something worthwhile, I'm gonna point to Fall Brawl with his feud against Adrian the Demon Cage. Because, well, actually, yes. That is the last time he did something worthwhile, because Adrian Cage actually beat Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper, the last time, Roddy Piper hasn't had a worthwhile feud since 1998. And that, my friends, is because of his stamina getting to the point of where it is, where he really can't work anymore. But he still does appear, me using him under the Piper's Pit moniker, to allow myself to still use his charisma and his popularity to get other things over, rather than just keep Piper away and have him be making the $24,000 a month that he's making. Me being an idiot, I included the exclusively in the ring thing, because if memory serves, I may have, yep, that's why. Because when I signed him to a contract to steal him away from WWE, and had to include extra incentive to get him away from the WWE. Well, now with everything set up and in context, you saw earlier that Owen Hart was United States champion. But you also now have Kurt Angle as Southern Heavyweight, or the formerly known Hardcore title, which I believe was renamed in 1999 when Chris Candido won it. I believe that's when the title was renamed. I don't remember, it was either when Jarrett won it or Chris Candido, I forget. As I mentioned, Owen won the title, and Owen has actually held the title, number one, Owen has held the title for the longest amount of time out of anybody, since well, no. I mean, that was a decent run. No, that was only a 2-month. That was only a few months. Decent run. No. It was a month. Vader had a 4-month run. Ron Simmons had a decent run. Rick Rude held it for the summer. Vader held it for 7 months. Honestly, I think this might be the longest run since Vader. Man, it might be the longest run since Vader, or it might be the longest run since Luger, but I'm not sure. But either way, also you can notice that Owen has the most defenses out of anyone, far none, since Vader back in 1991. Since Vader back in 1991, because Arn did have more, but Vader held the title in 1992. Arn lost it to Vader. But no, Owen is having a reign unlike any other, partially because he's actually holding the title he's actually the next time he defends the title, and I can tell you the next time he defends the title he will be victorious. It will be his 14th defense, tying Arn Anderson for the most defenses out of any United States champion in the history of this season, but also he will hold the title for a year, becoming the first champion to hold the title for a year in actually a ridiculously long amount of time, because I honestly don't remember the last time I ever had a champion in general hold a title for a year. You know, which, I mean, in a way it might play to the era, but it also may play to the idea that you don't really need, like, you could have a year-long run and have it suck. You know what I mean? Or you could have a year-long run and have it be the best run ever. But if you have a year-long run, and then the next guy has a year-long run, and then the next guy has a year-long run, and then the next guy does, and the next guy does, and the next guy does, then what's the point of everybody having one if everybody's going to have one? You know what I mean? Because if everybody has it, then it's not special anymore. You know, and yes, you might notice the Smoking Guns, the Guerreros, Ricky and Robert held the titles 7 different times. In actuality, the Rock and Roll Express did not hold the titles for 7 different times. They held the titles with me, I believe, 3 different times, and in total 7 different times, combining the NWA World Tag Team titles and the WCW World Tag Team titles. But as you can tell, up until their last title reign in 1996, which I think is around the time, or 1997 rather, which I think is around the time that Matt Bourne actually left the company, they held the titles 4 different times, and other than the Nasty Boys, the Texas Outlaws are the only tag team, well, them and Arn and Dean Malenko, which I would also point to as one of my more favorite tag teams that I've created in this season. But my point is that they held the Texas Outlaws, Arn and Dean, and the Nasty Boys are the only 3 tag teams, well, and Mankind and Terry Funk are the only 4 tag teams that I've actually had hold the tag team titles on multiple occasions. You know, instead of going through the TV title history, I do want to point something out, that you have guys like Mankind, Shawn Michaels, Diamond Dallas Page, Vader, Steve Austin. You have certain guys who many people thought would have, or if I'm not mistaken, many people would have given multiple title runs by now, but no, it doesn't have to do with the fact that that they're not good, or they're not with the company anymore, or I don't want to give them the, no, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that if the story isn't there, then they don't get the title. You know what I mean? Because I'm not going to give him the championship just for the sake of giving him the championship. Which is why Ric Flair only has 13 reigns as WCW World Heavyweight Champion as opposed to 14, 15, or 16. It's because he's had feuds outside of the title picture as opposed to just always being in the title picture and always being the guy who challenges for the title, wins the title, drops the title, challenges for the title, wins the title, drops the title. It's not like Jim Crockett Promotions back in the 80s where you have a very limited group of people. It's more where I have a wide range of people who can challenge for the title. And, the best example of this is me going back to Starrcade of last year and showing you that basically, this and this started a feud between Dallas and Flair, which Piper had to be on Starrcade. Piper had to be on Starrcade. But, you had Chris Jericho versus Eddie Guerrero. What's the point of that? Well, you didn't have Steve Austin, you didn't have Shawn Michaels. You had Shawn Michaels and Sting in the third match from the top, partially because the television title tournament was finishing that night. So, there you go. But that's what I mean. Flair was in a segment. Austin and Pillman fought each other. You know what I mean? It's like, there are ways to have, back in the day, you would have had a small group of guys harboring the main event and hogging the main event. But now, I have a wide range of people, and I'm, further establishing, future stars like Kurt Angle, who's right at the cusp of the main event, and you might say, what, he's an 80, how is he at the cusp of the main event? It's because this is his first championship in my company. The Southern Heavyweight title is the first title he ever won in my company. Then you have him, Goldberg. Goldberg is a former World Television Champion and Southern Heavyweight Champion, and he is also at the cusp of the main event. But then you have guys like Diamond Dallas Page and Dean Malenko, and, you might say, oh, why is Dean Malenko on the way down? Dean Malenko's on the way down because I fear his resiliency. That's why Dean Malenko's on the way down. But my point is that the fact of the matter is, that's what this game is, and that's how you keep building up and building up and building up, because people always ask me, how in the blue hell could you last a year, let alone 9? And that is because I have changed. I believe it was last year I added in women because that was the only thing I hadn't done. I hadn't gained a women's division, which, not to say women's divisions aren't good, it's just that there's not a lot of talent because WWE has them all. Then you have Goldust, who's here, who I changed. I had Dustin. I've had Dustin. I think I've had Dustin since the start, pretty much. Yeah, I've had Dustin since the start, and he just became Goldust. He just became Goldust back in 1998. Last year. After being Dustin from 1991 to 1998. Basically the point of it was that basically I needed a new Goldust, and, it started with Mankind. He abducted him. Dustin went away for a while, came back as Goldust. And then the feud started with him and Mankind. Goldust won. But it gave me a new person to push. I am a little disappointed by the fact that Dustin has a 61 in stamina and really can't be a main event guy, because if you can't go 20 minutes, then I don't see you as a main event guy. Which, by the way, I should probably change his gimmick. Now that I see that, because I honestly did not see that. But just because he doesn't have the stamina to be a main eventer doesn't mean I can't rely on Goldust to be that guy who gives new guys the test to see if they can run with the main event. And I'll change his gimmick later. But the best example of this is Corny, who actually is supposed to be a freelancer, has been working with me since 1991 in a variety of different roles. From managing to announcing to now, Jim is actually the authority figure of the company, taking over from Eric Bischoff, who I wanted to basically get off TV. As he had been the authority figure and the guy since 1991. Or since about 1993, 1994, when I got rid of Nick Bockwinkel. But my point is that it's all about building and building and rebuilding and breaking down and building up again and breaking down and building up again. That's what this game is, and that's how you keep it going. That's how you keep your interest level high in this season, by building and rebuilding and building and rebuilding. So in a way, excuse me, I know in the past I had focused on this idea that basically I'd go into this, I'd book a show, and then we'd come out the other side. But that's not what this is about. This time around, what this is about this time around is showing, well, in some cases, the difference between TEW 16 and TEW 13, because this is the only attachment I still have to TEW 13. And some might say, oh, why don't you transfer it over? I don't want to. I prefer keeping it here. But before we go, I do want to point to the WWE. Because the WWE is the opposite of where I am. Ignore Bill Goldberg. He's somebody I haven't, it's something I have put off taking care of, because for the longest time he was actually injured. So I didn't really care. Or something like that, I forget. But I have to take him out of the company because it is a duplicate, because in this file, Goldberg was named Goldberg, but I imported other people, and in another file, whatever file I brought him from, I'm going to wager a guess and say it might have been 2004, his name's Bill Goldberg. So there you go. Bobby Heenan's still there. I signed Bobby Knight. Bret Hart's still there at 42 years old. He's on the way down. He's on time decline. And he's in the same position he was in when you start. The WWE did nothing to push him. And that's actually how I ended up with Shawn Michaels, who got released a while back from WWE. But the problem with me getting Shawn Michaels was that, frankly, as you can see just by looking at some of these people, that WWE actually does have a lot of the good women. Davey Boy Smith is still here. They actually signed Matt Bourne from me after I released him, which I don't mind because I basically, after, 5 years of using him, I ran out of ideas for him and I didn't want to give him Doink. But they did, so there you go. John Tenta is still with the company. They signed Ron Simmons soon after I released him in, I believe, 1995, 1996, and he's been there ever since. Haku's been there since the start. Hawk's been there since the start. Hollywood Hulk Hogan's been there since the start. IRS. Actually, no, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Michael Wall Street signed with the WWE after he left me. I signed Kane to them. Jake Roberts has been there since the start. So has Jim Duggan. JJ has too. JBL. Actually, I think they signed Bradshaw. Kama's been there for a while. Kato's been there since the start. So has Kerry. Kevin Nash, they signed from... I think they might have signed him from me. I'm not sure. Oh, no, I released him. Yeah, I released him. Oh, no, they actually did sign him from me. Well, no. I'm confused. I think they did, but I think it was more that I was going to sign him back. When they signed him, which is possible, they signed him from me. I was letting... no, Sid Vicious. They signed Sid Vicious from me. That's what it was. I was bringing Sid back, and they signed him. I had Nikita. They signed him after I let him go. Perfect has never left. In a way, the point of this is to show where the company is. I mean, it's not necessarily to show why I'm doing better because they're a cult and I'm an international company, but it's more the fact that WWE, maybe, I mean, in a way, it's the difference between the games, but it's that WWE never moved forward like I did. I mean, look at the tag team champions for the example of that. But now jumping over to the other companies, you have New Japan with Jushin Liger winning the Best of the Super Juniors for the third time. Kazu Yamasaki won the G1 Climax. Masachono, Jushin Liger actually won the G1 as well, which I'm kind of confused about if he's a lightweight and... Oh, so a lightweight can... Okay, and a lightweight can participate in that too. Okay. Tiger Mask 4 in Koji Kanemoto. Unsure of who that is. Koji Kanemoto is actually 2 champions. Okay, here we go. The interesting side. Tatsumi Fujinami, one of the greatest, by far, IWGP New Japan performers in the world ever, is, well, still IWGP Heavyweight Champion. Way past his prime. Chono and Tenryu and Hiroshi Tenzin won the Young Lions Cup. There's Terry Gordy over in New Japan, All Japan. Steve Williams over in All Japan. Steve actually never left Japan from the start. He has not left Japan. Neither has Stan Hansen, who I had at the start and let him go. And then I realized how stupid I was for letting him go. And Gordy has not left either. But I mean, I guess the main point of this is to show what it takes to rebuild and move forward. maybe not rebuild and move forward, but like keep interest as the years go by. Because the one thing that I have done since the start of the season is I've kept an eye on these two things in the creative meeting to make sure that the people who had a future were being used to protect their future. And I am extremely surprised that Kurt Angle is here. I'm happy Shawn Michaels is, I'm happy Ric Flair still is, and I'm happy Sting is, and I'm also surprised and kinda happy that Scott Steiner is, because Scott Steiner is about to get a heavy, heavy push as a singles competitor for the first time in his career. Before we leave, let's just take a look at the hidden gems. John Cena, who just debuted, Ken Anderson, CM Punk, who debuted a year ago. Well, that's actually surprising. Ken Anderson, who just debuted, Rockin' Robin, and laugh if you will, but Sable. The last thing I wanted to look to is this. Eric Bischoff now has not been featured on programming in a very long time. Now we move to this one, which has been going on since July of last year, which Curryman was forced to join the Dark Army after losing a match to Goldust, which had the stake that his contract would be sold to James Mitchell and he would be forced to join the Dark Army. I went over this feud already with Diamond Dallas and Ric Flair. For weeks leading up to this, all we saw was a woman in the crowd who had signs stating that she was the Dudley's #1 fan. And ever since then, she has been with Bubba and Devon as their manager, and this sparked the feud between Tom Pritchard and James Storm, trying to sway the #1 fan away. There you go. You got Kidman and Edge and Christian, which started with Christian beating Kidman. And this also has the extra idea of Ultimo Dragon being involved with the cruiserweight title. The Smoking Guns are going against Funk and Foley after beating the Steiners, which led to the Above storyline after the Steiners lost. This storyline with Ken Shamrock, The Rock, the Boss Man, and the Giant, and Harley Race, who manages The Rock. Basically, Ken and The Rock were a tag team, and then following the tournament, the Boss had been, sticking his nose in the feud and trying to, which raised the idea of, is one of them swaying to the side of the Boss? And then the Boss got involved in the Rock's match, which set up the match that you see there. But also what raised the stakes in this feud was Harley Race getting attacked on the first of the year, which is somebody we have not seen since he got attacked on New Year's Day. This feud is Eddie's first challenger, with Sting winning a fatal 4-way to crown the #1 contender for the World Heavyweight title right after following Super Brawl, and now Sting and Eddie are set to collide at Uncensored. The Horsemen Reforming was initially supposed to be a feud involving Ric Flair, but I changed it to include Goldberg and the new stable member, Kurt Angle, after I found out how good Kurt Angle was. And now, the last feud, as Owen Hart, the reigning United States champion, would now go on to tell Jim Cornette, draw up the contract and he will fight all comers. Basically, Cornette has a month to find a challenger for Owen to set up a match for the pay-per-view. And thus far, Owen has fought, as you saw... Excuse me. Damn. Excuse me. As you saw, Owen fought Terry Gordy at Super Bowl, and he fought Dave Finlay back at New Year, New Beginnings. And now Owen is on a collision course with Jeff Jarrett at Uncensored for the United States title. Which, this feud isn't necessarily to build up somebody new, but this feud is. This feud is to give Edge and Christian and Mysterio and Kidman, all four of them, TV time. This feud is to help James Storm, who's an opener, and the Dudley Boys get more TV time and get over a little bit more. This is supposed to build up Curryman, and this is supposed to give Scott his singles push. But either way, that's what I mean. Always looking for that next person to build up. Every year since about 1997, I've picked one person on the roster, two people on the roster, sometimes three people on the roster, to have them be my focus for the year, to make sure by December of that year, when Starrcade rolled around, not only would they be doing something, but they would be more over than when they were at the start of the year. And that's how you always keep it fresh, because you always have somebody new to work with guys who have been there for the longest time. Like Flair, like Arn, like Barry Windham, like Sting, etc. It keeps those guys fresh too, because they always have new foil. And the last thing I wanted to point out, to speak to my point, is that there does, however, come a point where you look at certain talent and you get to the point where you say, I've exhausted all possibilities with them, and it's time for them to go. And I reached that point with Brian Pillman. I reached that point with Anthony Durant. Helmsley's coming back. Ron Harris, I'm a bit iffy on. But there are some people here who I have reached, that creative peak with, that it basically, once their contract is up, they need to go. I mean, hell, Vader is the perfect example of that, because he'd been with me from 1991 till 1999, and then I finally said, Vader, it's time to go. But then February 2000 rolled around, and Vader was still a free agent, so I said, okay, you're still decent, I'll bring you back. You're still serviceable, so I'll bring you back. I'll bring you back for one more run. But then you look at, Anthony Durant, who has also been here since 1991, but I have exhausted all possibilities with him, because it got to the point where, yes, Durant has done it all in the company. He's been United States champion. He won the Battle Bowl. He's been world champion. And even tag team champion with Gary Wolf before Gary Wolf left. And, I'll even point this out. He was not really that bad. I mean, his average rating was in the 70s. His highest rating was the 90s. But that's when he was the challenger. There came a point when I realized that Anthony Durant was not a serviceable champion. And because I figured that out, because look at that match. Look at his highest rated match from 1999. 92 with Chris Jericho, Shawn Michaels, Ric Flair, and Sting. If you can't get a good match with Ric Flair and Sting, Chris Jericho, Shawn Michaels, you know, who do I blame? Do I blame you, or do I blame do I blame the other guys? You know, then you have a 90 with Flair, Sting, and the Hollywood Blondes. You know, it came a point where it started, where I had to start to think, is he the one that needs to be blamed, or is it the other guys? Now you also have him, who you saw was getting released. That's because he's been here since the 1991, and much like Vader, he needs to go. He needs to go. You know, and that's the point that I was trying to make, that there comes that, yes, it is hard to reach the point that I've gotten. And I always said that once I can't think of stuff to do that gets me excited to keep going, that's when I would stop. Whether it's 10 years, whether it's 12 years, whether it's now, it doesn't matter. When I stop getting excited about this, that's when I stop. But the reason why, you know, certain things happen is because of roster turnover. That's why I am able to keep interested, because of roster turnover. Because guys like Brian Pillman leave. Because I reached the point where they should. I mean, yes, fine. There may have come a point where guys like Pillman should have left a long time ago, or this person should have left a long time ago, but it came time when I realized that if I wasn't doing anything with them, or if I wasn't using them to the best that they could be used, that it was time for them to leave. But with that being said, let me know down in the comment section below how surprised you are that I am still with WCW after 9 years, and that I have set some history up, or my own history up, for WCW in the 1990s as a successful company, as opposed to a minor company, or a flash in the pan like they were in real life. And let me know also down in the comment section below if you still play TEW 13, and if so, is it the same reason why I do? But if you don't want to leave a comment, you can always leave a like and give your feedback in the form of subscription. Either way, let me know that, either way, any way you do it, feedback is always welcomed and appreciated. Sorry, I'm a little bit rusty. But before you go, do not forget to ding dong that notification bell to always know when a new video is up on Wrestling Express. Till next time. Later.